Once again, a very good afternoon, a very good morning, a very good evening. I don't know where you're watching or listening from. This is Matarenda on Radio 54. And we're going to be talking about Zimbabwe. On the 4th of March, we woke up to the news that the USA decided to remove the sanctions of Zimbabwe, to terminate the sanctions on Zimbabwe. And so many people were celebrating, and so many people were angry. So today we're going to be joined in by Patson Malisa, who is the former Deputy Presiding Officer at the AU Ecossoc, and Marshal Gore, who is a Senior ZANUPF Leader in the UK, to talk about the impact of these sanctions and what it means for them to be removed. So many people had, mixed reactions and questions. Do we have sanctions on Zimbabwe? There's been a question, do we have sanctions on Zimbabwe, or the sanctions are targeted? But now that they are removed, people go to understand that, well, we actually had sanctions on Zimbabwe. So now we're going to understand deeper into the meaning of this. And good morning, good afternoon, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Thanks for having us, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Indeed.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. So, guys, what does this mean when we talk about the removal of sanctions? What does this really mean? I'll start with you, Patson. You were part of the group of people who met in Johannesburg and drafted the communique, the first communique that actually went to the AU. For AU to come together and assist in the removal of sanctions before this whole campaign started. You led on that. So what does this mean to you? What does it mean? What is the impact on Zimbabwe, on South Africa, and SADC? What does this mean?
Well, firstly, let me thank you for having me on your show and for allowing me to share with your viewers and listeners. And in terms of this particular program, the African Union had actually come up with a assembly decision in 2009, which was 10 years before we started our drive, where after having seen the completion of the global political agreement between the necessary political parties, they said it is imperative that all sanctions against Zimbabwe be removed for the alleviation of both the humanitarian as well as the economic crisis. Now, in terms of the sanctions that were imposed by the United States, one of the things that, is very key to understand is that the United States, ever since 1945, has been the pillar upon which the global industry has been built. The central bank of the international system, the IMF, happens to be within the control of the United States. The currency of most reserves is the United States dollar. And on top of that, the primary partner with regards to economic as well as aid in development countries is the United States. And therefore, when sanctions are imposed on a country like Zimbabwe, especially by the United States, that means there is no chance of economic participation with the United States. And on top of that, that also diminishes the access to the very central currency that basically revolves around global industry. And as a result, trade even with partners in the region was difficult and has remained difficult up until this point. So in terms of what comes next from this and what does it mean? It means that Zimbabwe now has both access to economic instruments, whether it be in terms of aid or in terms of financial loans, credit lines, which can then stimulate economic sectors, particularly mining and agriculture. These are elements that, basically made the crux of the Zimbabwean economy known as the breadbasket of Africa at one point. And all these can be revived by the simple fact that there is now this reactivation of this access both to the formal currency as well as the formal economy upon which the rest of globalization is led upon.
That's right. Thank you so much for the presentation, and over to you, Mr. Gore. What does this mean as a senior ZANUPF leader? I can say you guys were kind of accused of so many things during the anti-sanctions campaign, that it is ZANUPF. ZANUPF is the biggest sanction. Now that they are removed, what do you say about that? You on mute.
I do agree with what Patson has said partially, but I think my starting point is that the sanctions have not been removed completely, and the Global Magnitsky Program obviously does admit that the sanctions were effective and unprecedented to the Zimbabwean economy. So our view is that there's no need to celebrate any illegality itself. The sanctions are illegal, and our view is that we are calling upon on the complete removal of all the sanctions. The partial amendments to the sanctions does not mean a lot to us as a country, and the fact that the executive, the president, the number one citizen in the country remains on sanction. Again, this is a sheer manifestation of treachery from the US government, not being open in admitting that the sanctions are unprecedented, illegal, they violate the UN Charter, and they should have never been there in the first place.
Okay. When I look at the documents released by the State Department here, it seems like they are saying 90% of sanctions have been removed. I mean, the sanctions, the executive orders that really affect, the whole Zimbabwean government, citizens and companies. And what we are left with right now are targeted. According to them, they're targeting individuals, as you mentioned, the president, the vice president, his wife, and so forth. Those are individuals. What is the impact of these sanctions, the targeted sanctions, if I may call it that? What is really the impact? Just looking at the executive orders, which I might say were really that important, they are now out of the way. When we look at the Infrastructure Development Bank and the Agriculture Development Bank that were removed from the list in May 2020, we're now left with individuals. Can we work with that?
Well, the removal of the executive orders without repealing ZIDERA does not mean a lot to our people and to our government. So the position of the government and the position of the party is that we are calling for the ultimate removal of all the sanctions. And I actually think that this is the issue that we had again before, when we were told initially that the sanctions were targeted. But now we have seen with these announcements that the sanctions were never targeted. They targeted key state institutions. They targeted our financial institutions. They targeted our ordinary citizens. Again, this is an admission. Again, with another deceiving tool coming in. If the US government is genuine and sincere on the removal of sanctions, they should repeal ZIDERA ultimately and give us a fresh start. There's no need to target the 11 individuals they have put. What have they done? Have they been tried before the courts? So these are the questions that we are raising, that we cannot be deceived into celebrating measures that are still very illegal in their nature. And that's the position we are taking as a party.
Okay, I'm quoting here from the USA Treasury. It's something that they released on their website. The United States remains deeply concerned about democratic backsliding, human rights abuses, and government corruption in Zimbabwe. That's Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, Wally Adeyemo. Yeah, the changes we are making today are intended to make clear what has always been true. Our sanctions are not intended to target the people of Zimbabwe. Today, we are refocusing our sanctions on clear and specific targets. President Mnangagwa's criminal network of government officials and business people who are most responsible for corruption or human rights abuse against the people of Zimbabwe. These changes to our approach provide an opportunity for the government of Zimbabwe to undertake key reforms to improve its record on human rights, good governance, and anti-corruption. Consistent with the findings of Treasury's 2021 sanctions review, we are committed to the use of economic sanctions towards a clear and specific objective in coordination with diplomacy and other tools of statecraft. So they are saying we are targeting, they say the individuals are based on the criminal networks and human rights abuses and so forth. I'm not asking you to either defend or just say anything else, but is there a way that our leaders can work, to change things, whatever they're being accused of? Is this something they can really work on their image? I'm talking about re-engagement. Yeah, they are re-engaging with the international community. They are reaching out to everybody else to say, look, we have changed. Are there things they need to really put in place where our citizens are concerned? This is about sanctions, and also as a country, as citizens, how do we feel? What is the feel? What is the feel on the ground? What are people saying about these things that the president is being accused of? Is this something that we can work on?
Martha, my view is that the sentiments from the US ambassador who read the statement, I think was very deceiving. And in the first place, if we can question, who are they to judge the moral compass of our leaders? We need to be honest when we are talking about diplomatic engagement. On what platform does the US as a country stand to accuse the leader of our country and the senior leadership of our government that they are corrupt? Are they clean themselves? These are the things that we need to look at. We have an international organization like the UN that is responsible for governing international relations amongst countries. The UN have completely called these sanctions illegal and not supported them. So why have the US pursued on an agenda of vilifying our leaders, vilifying our key state institutions, and accusing them of being corrupt? And the first question to ask, on what level of ground or platform are they putting these accusations? If these accusations been taken to court to be substantiated, until we get a court order actually proving that the accusations of human rights are true, then we can discuss these things. But as far as I'm concerned, at this stage, these are all frivolous accusations that are not based on any legal qualification, and therefore we do not accept those accusations.
Okay, I'm gonna read another statement. Still with you, Gore. Before I move back to Patson, I need to ask something. So on March 8th. The State Department, USA State Department, released another statement saying government of Zimbabwe forcibly removed the US aid democracy, human rights and governance assessment team. The Zimbabwean officials abruptly detained and deported US aid officials and contractors who were conducting an assessment of the development and governance context in Zimbabwe. Members of the assessment team were subject to aggressive handling, prolonged interrogation and intimidation, unsafe and forced nighttime transportation, overnight detention and confinement, and forced removal from the country. As we have made clear in the strongest possible terms of the government of Zimbabwe, these actions against a team of development professionals legally admitted to Zimbabwe to support the government of Zimbabwe's expressed commitment to democratic reform are egregious, unjustified, and unacceptable. So on the 4th of March, USA terminated these executive orders. On the 8th, the government of Zimbabwe forcibly removed USA agencies and arrested them. What is the communication here? What picture are we painting? Is it not the time that we should be trying to build relationships and, building on the re-engagement? They are accusing us of human rights abuses. Then we wake up to agencies being arrested and all of this. What
No,
does it say?
Mother,
Yes.
again, that statement is false, and I think it's full of again naive accusations. Those people were diplomatic people. They were not aid workers. They came in direct from OFAC to come into our country on a secret mission to engage with opposition political leaders, to engage with the civil society without following the proper diplomatic channels. And credit to our security in Zimbabwe that they were actually followed, and they were actually found that they were doing what they had not purported to report when they entered the country. This matter was raised with the US Embassy, and they did admit that they were on an international relations assignment, and they had failed to notify the government of Zimbabwe. Again, this is another sign of US manufacturing of propaganda to try and portray our people and our government as undemocratic. Yet again, this is how they operate, not only in Zimbabwe, they do this in many countries, that they send senior government official people as undercovers in country to reveal information. But credit again on this situation that our government security forces were able to fish out and to confront them on the matter.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your contribution and your response. Back to you, Patson. I'm just going to look at regional impact of sanctions over the years. We have seen the influx of Zimbabweans into South Africa, Botswana, and neighboring countries. Should we focus on the positive impact of these sanctions? What does this mean? Do you see a group of Zimbabweans deciding to pack their bags, go back home, and start building on the positive impact of the removal? I do remember soon after COVID, we had some comrades who actually went back to Zimbabwe, joined into agriculture, and they did very, very, very well in the agricultural sector. So just building from there, do you see more people going back, or more people buying into this positive outcome of the removal of sanctions?
You know, being a diplomat, I have to be positive, unfortunately, even when the picture looks gloom. And the picture at the moment, as you've heard from our comrade, and I'm pretty sure it's a sentiment that is being felt by a lot of Zimbabweans, that indeed there might be a lot more to what is being said than what is not being said. And I think at the end of the day, from a diplomatic perspective, regionally within Southern Africa, I think that the primary concern of every regional partner will be, what can we do? Because
right.
At the end of the day, we have to stimulate the economy. One of the things that I've highlighted already is that the previous sanction regime really targeted state-owned enterprises as well as other private enterprises that were stimulating Zimbabwean economy for decades. So at the end of the day, if we are to have a reintegration of these particular entities, we are going to have to come as a region and say, look, we might not have everything that we need, but we have something. Let's work with what we have. And in terms of the citizenry, at the end of the day, there's a saying that is taught to me in economics that says revolution rises as a result of rising expectations and not scarcity. So, if people really want to see Zimbabwe's human rights, election, or democratic track record improve from whatever they believe it needs to improve from, the answer is not to impoverish the country. The answer is to make sure that indeed the quality of life for each Zimbabwean is improved and is put to a point where bread and butter is not the first and last thing that they worry about. I mean, if you think about it, the more you have, the more you want, the more invested you are in its protection. And that gets you to think more critically and analyze the state of your society as well as where you live. So democracy really needs a stable and functioning economy. So from a regional perspective, even within the African continent as a whole, it will be essential to really get on board to say, you know, our brothers and sisters in Zimbabwe, let's work with what we have right now. We have a dispensation with African Common Free Trade Area, which actually demands that all regional bodies and the partners thereof engage one another in economies of scale. And by that, we mean that the best producer of whatever basic material or finished good that is within reach of the African continent is the best partner before we even look outside. Let's look inside and let's scale our economies based on that. So I think from that perspective, from a diplomatic point, again, we have to come in and say, this is what is there. What do we do with that? But in terms of the political position and as well as the internal affairs of the country, these are things that cannot be impeded on even by means of diplomatic or multilateral channels. You know, in fact, when Zimbabwe faced one of its most difficult crises in 2008, you know, the African Union through SADC commissioned that there be a negotiated, a negotiated restoration of both political stability as well as peace. And the only way that happened was when Zimbabweans took a hold of their own destiny. That is what the global political agreement was about. It was not an AU imposed or an SADC imposed or a UN imposed agreement. It was a Zimbabwean organic agreement. And therefore, anything else that comes out of the political dispensation within the country of Zimbabwe has to be organic. Anything to the contrary does not speak to the reality, and it will be rejected ultimately, because it's like with a baby. If you feed a baby what it doesn't want, no matter what, even if it's hungry, if it does not want pudding, it does not want pudding. And with our democracies within Africa, it would seem that the moment you institute a culture that is not organic to the ways and means by which people have governed themselves, it will be rejected. Even if you put best people on there, it will result in disaster. So we have very good case studies in the form of Liberia, Sierra Leone, and all the likes who came in with specific democratic structures in place as a result of the goodwill of having returned slaves, as well as the United States. But they went through their turmoil ultimately because organically it was rejected. So any democratic dispensation within the country of Zimbabwe has to be a result of the effort and the thinking of the Zimbabweans.
Yeah, actually,
thank you so much. Yes,
sorry, Martha, just to add on what Patson has said, actually is touched on some very important points. I think personally for us, we want to extend our gratitude to SADC, the African Union, and to some extent also the United Nations for standing with us in ensuring that the injustice or illegalities of the sanctions have been tackled at global platforms. So that has been a plus. And also to add that we have benefited from regional cooperation during this period of the unprecedented sanctions. So the support from our regional partners, especially SADC, has been grateful. And as a country, we appreciate that. And we also appreciate SADC for initiating the 25th of October Anti-Sanctions Day as a regional platform for all our regional neighbors to rally behind the total removal of sanctions. And we envisage that this will continue until even the measures put under the Magnitsky programs have been removed. So that's our sentiment. But I do agree with Patson also that our focus should not be entirely on sanctions. Our focus should be also on growing our economy and on ensuring that we develop ourselves within our means from the internal resources that we have. Yes, the restrictive measures have not helped, but still the will is there. This is why even under sanctions, we've recorded unprecedented economic growth. So he's right in saying that the solutions are Zimbabwe driven. And also we should not give up to say because of these still existing coercive measures, then we should give up and say and cry foul. No, we're galvanizing ourselves and the luta continue.
thank you so much for adding into that. Zimbabweans actually are capable of uniting. We can look at the first Chimurenga. There was unity there. The second Chimurenga, there was unity. The removal of RG Mugabe, we saw Zimbabweans coming together to say, Dara must rest for now. We're good. We're okay. We saw Zimbabweans coming together, and the region, the international community then came in. So I think what's been lacking in the past few years is the unity where sanctions are concerned. We are divided as a country. There are those who say there are no sanctions, then there are those who say there are sanctions. So how can we work to unite where this is concerned, to rebuild from this removal, partial or 90% removal, whatever that is? How can we work to build on this unity? Because
Yeah,
everybody is for Zimbabwe. We love the brand Zimbabwe. We care about Zimbabwe. Even those in the opposition, they want a better Zimbabwe. Everybody wants a better Zimbabwe. But how do we unite to see the same goal or the same enemy? Or if we can't agree on the enemy, how can we work together to agree on the goal, on the objectives, on what
I
we
think
want to paint a good Zimbabwe? What does that mean?
I think for me personally, Martha,
Yes.
we should always think Zimbabwe first. I think the challenge we have in our country is that people have taken our political differences to a larger extent to actually use the country as a tool to achieve their personal political objectives. I actually think that there's no patriotic Zimbabweans who would welcome sanctions would welcome sanctions into the country as to aid their political position. So I actually think that this is the matter also that has taken us back. I actually think that if we had all united along the political divide and along the civil society divide to actually call for the removal of these illegal sanctions, I actually think that would have achieved better progress. But I think it's disheartening that there are some Zimbabweans, even to this day, that still also agree and support the sanctions as a matter of a political incentive to allow their party to come into power. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that we should think beyond our political lines. We should think for the country and ensure that as Zimbabweans, we have a national goal that binds us together. For example, like Vision 2030, that we should stand united when it comes. If I live in the UK here, anything that is an attack on the country itself, no opposition will support it. Even if you go to America, anything that destabilizes the national consciousness of the country, no one will support it. But the most disgusting thing about our politics is that people can actually welcome infringements on the nation to make sure that the existing government faces challenges so that they can gain political expedience. I think it is that immaturity we need to get out of our politics. We must work together as Zimbabweans and protect the integrity and nationhood together. Then if we do that, then we'll be able to overcome the challenges that we have. And also, Patson has made a very good point also, that we must sit down and discuss and come together with a view that promote our national progress, even on matters around sanctions, But of late, we've not had a lot of support from the opposition political leaders. Not all, some. Some have supported and called for the removal of the sanctions. I think we saw in the past few years, we've seen former Deputy Prime Minister Arthur Mutambara coming out publicly also and echoing for the removal of sanctions. Morgan Tsvangirai, the late leader of, may he so rest in peace, of the opposition, before he died, he actually called for the removal of these sanctions. I actually think this is what we lack in our modern day politicians, that national consciousness of separating politics from the national agenda. We need to unite, and you're right, Martha, we need to work together on national objectives and not let our politics, paralyze our national objectives.
Okay, thank you so much for that. It's true. Sanctions have been used for political mileage, and unfortunately, this is both by ZANUPF and opposition. Sorry, I'm not on diplomatic mission, so I can as well just say it the way it is. So I feel sorry for those on diplomatic missions, like you just have to reserve it and keep it diplomatic. So political mileage have been something that, people using sanctions for political mileage. Anybody, you go to Mberengwa, you ask an MP there. This is Mberengwa that has just discovered lithium. It has got gold, it has got diamonds. We also have marula fruit. I mean, that's a resource. We have like everything in Mberengwa district. But the
Is that where you come from?
That's where I come from.
Are you from Mberengwa? Okay.
I'm from Mberengwa, yes. So when you look at, I'm both from Masvingo and Mberengwa, well, but yeah. So when you look at Mberengwa right now, the roads that Smith, if not Sisu John roads, put in there is the same road that we have from Shavane to Majiwa. You come to our area, the Mberewete area, the Ngwembe area, Munene Hospital is still the same as it was with all the minerals. So we turn around and be like, okay, we do have sanctions. I do understand. But just one Kangoda, that little Ngoda like this, can be able to change a whole lot of stuff. I spoke to some of the miners last year when there were some issues there. They said, I have got 200 tons of lithium, 200 tons of lithium, an individual. And that was taken. Somebody just came in and was like, you don't own that. And they took it. So I do understand when some people from the opposition or civil society or individuals come in and say, what sanctions? Because they have touched 200 tons of lithium that they did not benefit from. It did not benefit an individual. It did not benefit the district. So how do we build on that?
But Martha,
Yes.
Martha, I think I have to interject there. I think you're right to say that sanctions should not be used as an ultimate excuse for lack of development. I'm not here to justify that we've got everything right. There are areas where we have failed as the party in government, and I'm sure that the president has actually done a reshuffle of the new cabinet and reassigned people into critical areas that we think we need to improve. But again, when you look at the fundamental development of the economies, this is where we were handicapped by sanctions. That the lithium you're talking about, if you don't turn it into value addition or value beneficiation, if you don't set up a manufacturing plant that can manufacture lithium batteries, you don't get the ultimate benefits from it. And this is where now our industries and most of our trading industries were handicapped to go out internationally and look for money because of the sanctions. So the sanctions have had an impact in terms of our macro or microeconomic development. But also, yes, I admit, there are areas where we could have done better even with sanctions. And I would like to say that the president has made it very clear that even the imposition of sanctions should not detract us to that goal that we are focusing on of attaining Vision 2030, a middle income economy. Even with or without sanctions, that should be the focus on government. So yes, I agree with you, and I want to encourage all my colleagues in government that the excuses of sanctions should not be used as the paramount excuse against development. We must also focus with what we have. But yes, sanctions do limit the functionality of government. Sanctions have affected our financial institution. We have not been able to receive or enjoy the luxury of international lending because of sanctions. As a result of that, our infrastructure has suffered. But again, we are resilient as a country. If you look from 2001 up to now, there have also been major developments that have happened in the country. We've been resilient as a people in contributing to the development of our country. Even us here sitting, we've done a lot within our means, even at community level or at family level to instill development in our country. So we have used the leverage that we can. We have been innovative as a country. But yes, I agree, politicians should not use sanctions as an excuse for lack of development. We must ride over that and continue to work hard. Yes, I agree with you on that.
All right. Thank you so much for your response. And back to Patson, what is your advice to somebody who is based in Belengwa and they've got some lithium license or a gold mine? What then, if there are no sanctions in Zimbabwe, what is the next step they can take to engage with the international community to make sure that they also benefit as an individual, or those who want to form cooperatives and start utilizing what the resources that we have access to? What advice can we give to a young person who have got 4 hectares somewhere in Gore? What can they do now that there are no sanctions? We are focusing on the positive.
Let's say there's a positive move of the needle in terms of sanctions. I think that's right. That would be more accurate.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, so in terms of that, particularly from the local perspective, one of the key elements of this that I've been really stressing throughout the show today is the fact that globalization has made things so much more easier to reconnect to once there is that turning on of the channel, so to say. And thankfully, within the Southern African region, as well as within the continental region, the continental perspective, there is the options of chambers of commerce. There's chambers of mines, chambers of agriculture, upon which peer-to-peer interactions do take place between private companies, cooperatives, and organizations. And I think it will be key then for these cooperatives. I'm not too familiar with the whole legal makeup of businesses within Zimbabwe, but I would think that a cooperative is more like a community development entity, because that's what we have here in South Africa, where it's a private entity, but it's specifically stated towards community development, with the profits going into reinvestment into the capital. Okay, so right. I think it will be essential then that these cooperatives do peer-to-peer interactions with fellow cooperatives around the country as well as the continent. But I think a very essential part of this, Martha, is that the people of Zimbabwe really need to rally around the same voice when it comes to this particular issue. It'll be essential that your private entities give a full dynamic of what it is that is going on within the country. Because if indeed the sanctions were targeted, if there was a stifling of the voice of private sector in giving this issue to say, but look, we've got all these minerals of which can be of benefit to the whole world, of which could even be sold at much cheaper because of the fact that production costs are at a much lower rate and all the likes. These are things that could have been communicated, and you might have seen the total removal of sanctions much sooner than is said. But because of the fact that when it comes to the voice of private sector as well as NGOs, there hasn't been a concerted voice towards, firstly, really stating the state of affairs when it comes to day-to-day living, not necessarily in terms of rhetoric. It's easy to give an analysis and say we are suffering, but to come in and say, look, this is our capital, this is the value of our mineral capital, this is the value, this is the production cost, but because of this, there's an opportunity cost that has been rested on the country as well as the global village as a whole, because again, you could have gotten it much better from Zimbabwe than you would have gotten it anywhere else. A key element of this is platinum. Platinum being Zimbabwe being one of the leading, if not the leading producer of platinum for a very long time. But because of the fact that there hasn't been that concerted voice that says this particular mineral or this particular service would be much better served from over here. But because the numbers are like this and you have decided to go this way, you're missing out. There's an opportunity cost. I think this would be very essential for us to have come out of the civil society. This will really be a civil society job from the Zimbabwe perspective.
Oh, thank you so much for highlighting that. I think also the success of this campaign as of 2019 was that the civil society and individuals that came in tried their best to paint a picture of what is happening in Zim. If we look at Rutendo Matinyarare from the ZASAM, he's been doing a lot of writing. To some extent, people were like, wow, that's a lot of writing. But I did follow some of the good stories that he was sharing, and most of his articles were really explaining the negative impact. And I think over the years, that's something that, like you mentioned, Patson, that something that we had actually failed to do as a country, to paint the real picture of what is going on. Because someone will be like, but you guys have got land. Zimbabweans got their land. You were celebrated for land reform. So why are you guys suffering? Why are you guys all over? Why can't you just go to your father's land and start farming? At some point, I did question that. I'm like, yeah. Why can't we just do that? And talking about the land reform, which is actually very important where sanctions are concerned, because we date it back to when we took back our land. And that's when the sanctions came in. I want to ask this to Mr. Gore. Recently, we saw something happening in Zimbabwe. And citizens were moved from their land. This is not something just on social media. I actually know people who were removed from their land within some parts of Zimbabwe, and they were told that, the land belongs to the president. Just looking at the land reform and how it was celebrated, what is the picture painted here where a citizen is concerned when we are calling the international community to invest in our country, to say we are open for business, Zimbabwe is trying to reform, we've done this and that. Then there is a woman in Gore who is surviving by less than $1 per day. Then they woke up and their house is destroyed. Their home that they've been living on for the past 20 to 40 years has been destroyed. What does that say on that treatment of citizens when we are painting a picture to the international community?
Thank you, Martha. Obviously, it's unfortunate that you have asked me a question to comment on a story that I don't have a clear picture about. But what I want to put across is that there's rule of law in Zimbabwe, and the law works in Zimbabwe. If you are talking of people being illegally removed from their land for purposes, I think there was a clip in the social media that I saw because there are some roadworks happening between linking Harare and the new parliament building, and I understand that people were served notices that there's road construction, upgrading of roads. There's going to be a new road built here. But sometimes, when reporters come to us, we don't also admit that we're given not enough notice to relocate, because this state now is state land now going to be used for the upgrading of the country. And people normally use that information also to say the other side to the authorities, oh, we're being removed. But I'm not saying on that particular case you have quoted, but if it is a case, but what I can assure you is that there's rule of law in Zimbabwe. The land reform took place. Again, the government has worked hard to address some of the injustices that actually took place during the land reform period. As you understand, that was the land reform was a land revolution, where people actually went in to grab land, and government had to come back and put in correct boundaries and reallocate land so that equitably to everyone. But I know that during that process, there are also people that perhaps maybe lost out, or some people ended up going and getting offer letters on a land that someone else was there. So there were a lot of things that happened, obviously, and I think the government has been actually doing, the Land Commission has actually been doing a land audit. I think the results are due to be published quite soon. And I think the reason why the government was doing that is to address some of the land disputes that were happening, maybe two people being issued the same offer letter and people pushing each other and just, these are common issues that happen when there's been a land revolution. But I think I can attest here that our government is fully committed to ensuring that justice ensures as far as land is concerned. And land tenure is hugely policed in Zimbabwe. If me and you today go to Zimbabwe and invade someone's land and stay there using our political connections, I can tell you that we'll be arrested. Even myself, I'll be arrested if I infringe those. There's no political immune when it comes to justice in Zimbabwe. Yes, there could have been isolated cases that people have reported, but I'm sure if those cases are brought before the law, justice will be done.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much for that comment. I had sent a message to Dr. Gore from the ZANUPF, and he said they can't do that anymore. This is about the evictions. We discussed that at a policy meeting. So according to the policy meeting they had, nobody is to be evicted or removed from their land. And I'm sure they're still going to be releasing some statements or some press statement or any policy document regarding this issue, which I do believe that should be resolved. And, our people, our citizens, be reassured that this is our country, all of us.
Yeah. Actually, you're right. Actually, you're right. I'm reliably informed that I think 2 weeks ago, there was a caucus of all the key stakeholders in government where they discussed the concerning evictions that had started again going around. And I think government did agree that all the evictions should be put on hold. And this is why also the publication of the land audit has not been made public, because government wants to address some of the injustices that were in those reports and ensure that there is equitable distribution of land. And I'm also of the view that those that did benefit unfairly should also be forced to cede land that they took and give it back to government, so that everyone else who needs land can get it. No one should be allowed under land reform to have two farms. My colleagues in the party might disagree with me, but this is a fact of life that we want equitable land redistribution in Zimbabwe. And if there were injustice, they should be corrected, and it should be done fairly and in an orderly manner.
All right. Thank you so much. And the message that you just sent to your colleagues, because these colleagues are sitting in Borodale and making decisions for somebody who is sitting in Gore, who just own 4 hectares or less. And these guys have got 12. You're talking about 2. They've got 12 farms. They earn a very big chunk. So things like that, we just need to look into it, and for the progress of our country. When it comes to issues like this, this is what those people who impose sanctions use. They are not coming up with certain things. If I go online right now and say they took my land, they abused me, this is what they did. They take those clips, they take those videos and build a report based on that.
But Martha, that's grossly interference. If you look at international law and the history of global politics, I think Patson can attest. The US have taken a lot of land from other countries, and the US and Britain themselves, So who are they to morally judge and say they're putting sanctions on Zimbabwe because there's not equitable land distribution? I think we must be firm to say, if we have our problems in Zimbabwe, we should deal with our problems. We don't want an international head boy or head girl to come in and say, because this is happening, we're imposing sanctions on you. I live in the UK here. do you know what I mean? The land, if you look at the historic land ownership here of the lords and everything, there was a lot of injustices. America for itself,
right.
it's Red Indian land, you know, and if you look at these historical implications, there's nothing that can enable or justify the United States of America to come and interfere into our politics or to come and interfere into our internal affairs and put measures to punish us because of lack of rule of law. If there are problems in Zimbabwe, we should address them, as Patson says, as Zimbabweans. It's our duty to deal with them. I'm not saying we're a perfect country. We have our imperfections, but it's our responsibility to use this debate that we are having today to discuss these issues and to ensure that we resolve them. We do not advocate, or neither should we call for international powers or other member states to come into our country and invoke a global Magnitsky program just because of they've got issues with how we live our life. If I have differences with Patson, we go to our chief. It's nothing to do with the United States to interfere into our internal affairs, be political or be land tenure. That's my view.
All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I was just looking at it as a citizen and being vocal about it. I did touch on the issue of what was happening in Berengwa. I did touch on the issue of what was happening where the land issue is concerned, and this as a citizen and addressing it to say, you know what, we need to fix some of these things that are happening before impressing the outside world. And whether the USA or any other country have got their own debt doesn't mean to say we should just overlook what we are doing as Zimbabwean leaders. It shouldn't be some sort of a justification to like, nah, they did a lot. They took the Indians' land, so they can't say no, nothing. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, as a citizen, I then look at it as.
Listen, I agree with you. Sorry for taking too much time on this. I agree with you. Actually, we should. You see, the internal justices that we should have is for us. We want a better Zimbabwe for us. So you are right that we don't do these things. We shouldn't do these things to please anyone. We should do these things to please ourselves. You know. So we want rule of law in our country. We want freedom of speech. We want to respect each other's human rights within our country. And we are doing this because we are who we are. We are the people of Zimbabwe. And we should do this so that we can live together in harmony. We're not doing it to get marks or distinctions by international organizations, but we should do it as ourselves. And culturally, it's ourselves. We are very close people, respectful people, and we should maintain law and order and not allow any political forces to infringe on our human rights within our country. So I agree with you.
Yeah, that's
we must all of us commit to make Zimbabwe greater and a better place to live for ourselves, first of all.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much.
We are running.
Yes, you can
so
do that. We are running.
Patson has to speak.
Yes,
I'll be very quick, I promise.
Yes, we are running out of time. So in the next 5 minutes, I would like you guys to add into that and make your final remarks.
Most definitely. In fact, I think the unfortunate thing is that, you know, when it comes to the track record of the United States within the diplomatic society, within specifically SADC, the tactics have been rather unkosher, and Zimbabwe is not the only casualty. In fact, my own country, South Africa, has found itself at the receiving end of quite a few unkind interventions, or should I say tactics, by the United States. For example, I think it was a year or so ago, the ambassador here issued a statement saying that we had loaded a ship with armaments for Russia, yet, you know, we have a policy of non-interference, particularly with regards to the Russia-Ukraine matter. It was clearly in an effort to agitate specific bodies, and unfortunately, they had to retract because there was no proof that indeed this particular ship had any arms at all. You know, it was just a tactic. I don't know for what reason it was, but it was unfortunately done. And again, I think it was 2 years ago, they issued out an intelligence alert, both to our state parastatals, but then also publicly to say that there's a terrorist threat aimed for Johannesburg. So, at the end of the day, you then wonder, but then how do you issue a public intelligence report concerning an imminent terror attack? Is it to say that you know more about South Africa than we do, or is it to sort of cause commotion? And unfortunately, this happens in many other countries along other relationships. And I think, especially with regards to North-South relationships, there needs to be a reaffirmation that the diplomatic channels must remain diplomatic. They cannot change to oversight or to supervision, because at the end of the day, when you come and you present your credence to a country, you're there to serve as a partner as well as an advisor concerning the relationship between the two countries. And if asked, and I reiterate, if asked, concerning how the rest of the multilateral community must galvanize towards specific aims. So other than that, I think it would be very unjust of any country, because if you look deep enough, everyone has a skeleton. I mean, we, as we are right now, we have a skeleton. So the moment you start saying we have skeletons in your closet, you can easily say, but you have one on you now. So this is something that needs to be encouraged amongst the North-South relationships diplomatically. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Your closing remarks in 2 minutes, Mr. Gore. What is your stand where this is concerned?
Well, my stand remains that the sanctions are illegal and unprecedented, and we as Zimbabweans, we are calling for the unprecedented. We are calling for the removal of the sanctions in total, and not to have a side show on them. So we are calling upon the U.S. government to reconsider their decision to put this program. So we are asking them to remove the sanctions entirely and allow our country to function as independent as it can. Zimbabwe is a sovereign nation, and I'm sure Zimbabwe has the willpower to engage. We are an enemy to none and friends to all, and we are focused on driving our economy. We are not a threat to anyone in the global world. We don't deserve these sanctions. We've minded our own business, and we are focused on our own internal development. So that's what I have to say. The sanctions have to go in total.
Thank you so much, Marshal Gore. And Patson, what is your closing remark, your positive closing remark?
I will say from a regional perspective as well as continental perspective, Zimbabwe has got a lot to offer, and it is incumbent upon all its partners to ensure the full absorption of the country into the scaling of industry, as well as ensuring a rehabilitation wherever it's needed, particularly with regards to ensuring foreign reserves, as well as reconstructed infrastructure, as well as factories and all the likes. It is in the interest of every country within Southern Africa that Zimbabwe succeeds. And it's in the interest of the whole of Africa that Zimbabwe succeeds. So anything that impedes on that success, let us oppose it. And everything that is a benefit to the success of Zimbabwe, let us continue to support wherever we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. To those who are tuned in, who are listening, this is Patson Malisa, who is a diplomat, and Marshal Gore, who is a senior ZANUPF leader based in the UK. And I want to thank these gentlemen for their contribution to today's show. Patson emphasized on Zimbabweans taking advantage of the Africa free trade, now that sanctions are removed, we need to take advantage of that and unite. Both gentlemen agreed on the unity of Zimbabweans and to pave a way for a progressive and a successful Zimbabwe. So we are on the same page in terms of unit, and also Mr. Gore said we shouldn't be using sanctions for political mileage. We need to serve in our constituencies. This is where our leadership is concerned, to serve our citizens. Our citizens should come first. The brand Zimbabwe should also come first. So thank you, gentlemen. We have run out of time, but I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.